Cool, good afternoon. My name's Oliver Forder. I'm part of the EMEA EUC team. I'm a principal EUC specialist. I'm joined today with my colleague.
Good afternoon, everyone. Aaron Black with VMware. I'm one of the EUC product managers. We're grateful that you're here. I think you'll find this session to be very informative. I worked with a team in Sydney for about 6 to 9 months on this, and it was a great group. Put a lot of effort into this, went into sort of uncharted territory for VMware to release a product specifically for SCCM customers. But it's been an exciting journey, and I think you'll enjoy seeing the details of this.
Yeah, perfect. So just out of interest, how many people in the room are SCCM admins? Okay, a reasonable show of hands. And how many in the room are traditional kind of AirWatch, UEM admins? So this is where desktop and mobile collide, right? Right here. This is exactly the session you need to be in right now because it joins both worlds. Standard disclaimer, so before we get into the content. Okay, so I come from a PCLM background. I've been involved in IT for over 20 years. I started as an application developer. I've done help desk, I've done support, I've done desktop management, I've done MDM, and I've been with VMware for 6 years. So the output of this is the fact that this worked really well, right? So for the last kind of 20 odd years that I've been involved in IT, this worked well. You got a machine in, you imaged it, you locked it down, you delivered it to the end customer, they used it, right? And the output of that is that you knew what the experience was. Everybody supports this model, right, to date, from an SCCM perspective. On the flip side to that, from the mobile aspect, this doesn't work because workers are transient, they work from home, they travel all over the world. I've been in the office 4 times this year, 4 times, because I'm either on the road or I'm at home trying to repair my relationships because I've been on the road so much, right? So the net of that is if I was using the traditional model, my machine hasn't really connected much to the office network. On the flip side, when you look at the mobile estate, you know, these things are super rapid in terms of application updates. At the same time as well, they embrace a single ecosystem. And this is important because as an app developer in the mobile world, you ship your IPA file. As long as the machine has the right level of, say, iOS or Android, that's all you care about. Everything else is handled on the device, right? There's no dependencies. There's no things you need to worry about other than the OS level. Whereas from a Windows perspective, you want to ship an application without testing, without dependencies, it's not going to work, right? There's an awful lot of logic that's been built into this over many, many years. And the thing is when I go out and talk to customers, and I talk to customers quite a lot, there's so much involved in moving that legacy kind of Windows estate into the modern management world, right? And this is the direction of travel, so it has to happen, but at the same time, there's so much to unpick. How many people in the room have a GPO policy that's been switched on 5, 10 years ago that nobody knows what it does today? All they know is nobody's brave enough to turn it off. Anybody know that world? Right, yeah. I see some hands go up. So the thing is there's all this stuff that needs to be unpicked and you need to transfer through into modern management, and how do you do that, right? It's terrible. And we have a couple of customers that are saying, we're going to look at Win 10 as greenfield. So we're just going to do modern management with that. Right, and we're going to look at everything again. But typically customers are saying today, we don't know how to move this forward, right? We're stuck. We're in this situation where we've got a whole bunch of applications and settings and we don't know how to brace them in modern management. The outcome of that is that when you start to look at that traditional estate versus the modern estate, you can see quickly the kind of dichotomy between how you manage these machines, right? How you need to be able to get applications out there, how you need to push out updates, how you need to configure the devices, but at the same time make sure that your workforce can connect and has a great colleague experience. And that's really important, right? Inside VMware, we started talking about colleague experience, like a year ago, right, Aaron? And so the whole idea there is the fact that if you can make your end users productive as quickly as possible and diminish the costs on IT to manage the estate from an imaging perspective and those sort of processes, you make people more flexible. You give them the ability to roam, to leave the office and not have to worry about those updates and other pieces that come down to it. Anybody in the room looking at things like out of the box? You know, you just ship the device to the end user. I see a couple of hands go up there, right? And this is the new world. The new world is that you don't take a device, spend 3-4 hours prepping it, sometimes even longer. I mean, I've been there, right? I sat in front of a copy of Ghost, it gets to 99%, I'm at lunch, now. It's still at 99%. I'm not going to go to lunch, because if I go to lunch, it's going to fail. Right? I don't know why that always happens. So I sit there, I waste my entire lunch break while I'm waiting for it to get from 99 to 100%, just so I can put the machine in front of the end user before the end of the day. They're the kind of legacy processes that this removes from the ecosystem. The ability to ship direct to the end user, they wake it up, they enter in their credentials, everything comes down over the air, and they're good to go. Same time as well, when you look at Microsoft's own direction, and this really started post Windows 7. So Windows 7 was very much the kind of traditional 80 joined SCCM bound application delivery service, right? Windows 8 came along and it started to put these cloud controls in place, and they started to create their own CSPs. 8.1 took it that step further, and then Windows 10 is all about that model, right? Microsoft's own direction. The amount of CSPs they've onboarded in the last 3 years alone, they've transformed a single OS in 3 years, right? If you look back to Windows 10 in 2015, comparing it today, there's so much more capability, and that cadence isn't going away. Every feature release they do, there's a whole bunch of extra enablement so that you can manage these machines well from the cloud. And this is really important because, again, going to a lot of customers and they want that agility, they want that flexibility, they want the ability to not have to worry about particular machines, particular models, particular vendors. They just want to be able to ship the devices to the end users and the end users be productive with them straight away. Same time as well, there's this zero trust thing that everybody's talking about, right? And the net of that is that when you start to talk to customers and they sit down today and they say to me, hey, we know zero trust is the right direction. We know that VPN architectures and having to have different citizens in terms of how people connect, whether you're on the LAN or off the LAN, that's going away. If you treat your application estate with the same set of policies and micro-segmentation, you don't need to worry about the location of the end user. The point being is that modern management starts to enable that approach. Admittedly, most people I talk to say, hey, this is 3 years out for us, but we need to understand it today. The net of it is that would be super hard to do if you're relying on traditional technologies, right, and traditional methodologies. Same time as well, how many people in the room that are SCCM admins have put a whole bunch of BI and SQL scripts and various other pieces together to get a dashboard to see exactly what's happening in your estate? You push out a patch, how long does it take? Anybody in the room done that? I've done it. Anybody else? Okay. So a few hands. So you want to be able to see this stuff in real time, right? If your CIO turns around and says, hey, I've seen some zero-day outbreak, I want to know how much of my infrastructure could potentially be compromised, you want to get that figure to him quick. And having those actionable insights allow you to do that. And again, modern management provides that capability because we're always talking to the devices. It's not that check-in cycle that you have with SCCM. On top of that as well, self-service. We have a whole bunch of applications inside Workspace ONE, again, even inside VMware. I mean, the VMware on VMware story is a great story. If anyone hasn't seen this, I suggest you go and take a look. But we transitioned between 3 video conferencing solutions within a year. That's 22,000 people geographically dispersed. And the thing is from an end user perspective, I have a choice now whether I want to use any of those 3 video conferencing solutions, and then IT get to see which one's giving the best level of experience across all the different device types, because they can see who's using what and when. And again, that's super important because what you're saying to the end user is you choose the tool that makes you productive. And given the fact that the application estate is changing so quickly, you're going to want to be able to embrace new applications at the speed of life. Right? You're going to want to be able to transition people between applications when they see the value from it. And again, we're seeing this situation where central IT is breaking apart and it's saying to the business units, hey, if you see an application that you think your end users are more productive on, you can log in and you can add this application to the estate. And again, that breeds flexibility and it breeds choice and it decentralizes the traditional IT model. So the challenge we have is, I go in and speak to customers and they say, hey, we've got all of this world in SCCM baked out, it all works, we understand it, we know what it does, but we want to get to modern management. How do we do that, right? And from a VMware standpoint, we've managed Windows 10 for 3 years and we've heard this. We released various flings to try and make this supportable for end users. And then about a year ago, right? We sat down and we said, you know what, we need to get a model that's baked out, that's fully supported, that helps our customers transition and complement between these two worlds, because you can't just turn off one and jump to the other. You've got to be able to coexist for a period of time. So now you've got a foot in both camps. And that's really important because it gives you the flexibility to understand where the destination is, but at the same time give you a path to get to that destination. And the thing that really kind of resonates is when you turn around, and I've spoken to a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of customers about this. One customer that I worked with has 8,000 applications and packages inside SCCM. Now his challenge at the time, and he opened up with this and he was very pragmatic about it, which is, unless you can tell me how I can move those 8,000 packages into modern management, we can't move forwards, right? The cost for me to do that is prohibitive. It's more than the costs to manage my entire estate with modern management. That's ridiculous when you get into that world because now you're stuck, right? But using a product like Airlift, you can start to combine those two worlds. You can take the flexibility of choice through UEM and modern management, but at the same time, you can keep your traditional estate in one place, and you can do all your application distribution from SCCM, as you know and love, while you slowly move over to modern management. So it gives you that great opportunity to have a foot in both camps. When we look at, what we're trying to provide here, again, it's flexibility. When you think about VMware as a whole, we're that infrastructure layer that gives you the tools of choice to be able to make, strategic decisions and then pull those tools out as they make sense. And Airlift gives you that comparable, coexistence story between SCCM and modern management. It gives the SCCM guys the ability to knowledge share with the mobile teams. Like I say, the mobile teams don't have that depth of application estate that's required in the Windows world. They worry about an IPA file, not MSIs, not XEs, not zip files, not packages, not dependencies. They don't need to care about that, right? They just ship an application with a manifest and it unlocks. So the idea really is that what we're enabling here is the ability for you to do everything you've done traditionally, take advantage of modern management, and move forwards in a way that makes sense inside the organization. And you can do this as your kind of appetite for modern management increases. So it's not like you have to ship everything from day one. You find those use cases, and there's a lot of low-lying use cases which are super simple to implement in modern management, and then you can grow out the depth of audience that you want to push this out to. So Airlift, from our perspective, again, we wanted to make this simple, and there was so much R&D that went into this. There was so much for the team to do, and Aaron and the team there did a fantastic job in creating this product to enable the fact that you've got minimal impact in terms of knowledge of SCCM to make this happen. But from the SCCM side, you can take advantage of all that great depth of knowledge that you have about SCCM. So this is really where that mobile and SCCM worlds meet. Same time as well, it's web-based, it's super simple, there's a server-side connector, and we'll look at those in a bit more detail. So the idea here is that you can, connect these two systems together. There's a couple of databases that we spin up in the background. We connect to SCCM via commandlets, and we can lift and shift and map those workloads from SCCM and those collections into modern management. And then from there, you can then distribute those out to your devices, and you also get some reporting and some updates. There's some prerequisites here, and a couple of the prerequisites that are pretty important. So we introduced this with Workspace ONE UEM 9.5. Most customers should be beyond that now, so that's pretty easy for people to embrace. Same time as well, SCCM 2012 R2. So that's super important because we have a lot of customers that are sitting there right now thinking, do I need to go to 2016? Right? This gives you that lights-on ability to use 2012 while you make that transition into modern management. And again, this is how simple it is. It's just next, 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 and install, right? Pretty straightforward. So I'm going to hand over to Aaron now. We've got a bit of a demo on how this works.
Maybe just hit the space bar. Clicker. Okay, so we took a bit of we took some phase nomenclature and applied it to the top of this, the plan, execute, and monitor. You'll see that there's a bit of a flow to this, but it's very straightforward. You can use the getting started, or you can hide it. So far, is it going to roll there? There we go. Okay, yeah, so the first thing we'll do is the actual installation. So we pretty much take care of this for you. It is complex, but we've hidden the complexity behind just a fully automated script. So the good news is you basically don't have to do anything except hit next, 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 and finish. We'll pull down the components, right? We'll install them, then we'll configure them and securely lock them down so that only Airlift can use them. So that was the way to make it a fully automated thing. Now, the pro of that is all you have to do is hit next, next, finish. The downside is we don't recommend that you use any of the database components on here for something else, right? So just slice a VM, a small dedicated VM. It's not a heavy load. We're going to have 2 Windows services that run against 2 database components. The reason is that we just have a bunch of information, metadata basically, that we are caching and mapping the relationships with. So that's the purpose of the install and the different components. To get started, this is really straightforward. You're just going to go into your UEM tenant and grab some credentials and an API key. What we're doing is just setting up connectivity to the UEM tenant and connectivity to SCCM, because that's our job, to kind of be the middle manager between those two. Not to actually administer things, not to do functionality, because we don't replace either console, but you'll see that we basically are functioning as like a synchronization tool. So here we've pulled in SCCM device collections. That's what we do. We pull in the device collections, the names of them, and then we allow you to select them, and you hit map, and it's this simple. You either point it to an existing Workspace ONE group, or if you type in a new group there, we'll create that group for you. So that's where you're just saying this relates to this. You're mapping these 2 things together, and then your job is done. Airlift will keep the number of devices in sync. When it sees it pop up on one side, it'll identify it by unique criteria like MAC address, IP address. It's like 5 different things we can look at. So when that device enrolls, we know where you told it to go. So here we're going through, and a bit of this is just administration, right? This is in the UEM tenant, and this is where you just go and do stuff against a device that is enrolled. So once it's enrolled, you can set Windows updates. These things I would refer to as like co-management workloads. Like Oliver said, it's really simple. You can do this thing where you're doing co-management, and you pick what you want to manage with UEM. And if you're doing 7 things in SCCM and continuing with that, that's fine, right? You pick on here what things you want to manage with UEM. And I believe that is the end of our first demo.
Awesome. Thank you. So the thing is when you start to look at it, as long as you understand the settings for UEM in terms of the tenant, the API keys, and how to log into that environment, and at the same time the SCCM settings, that's pretty much it. That's really the hard bit done in terms of the integration. And it is simple. It can be done in a few minutes. I've done it myself. The outcome of this is that when you get those SCCM collections in, and again, rewind back a little bit, the modern management guys have organizational groups. They have smart groups in how they deploy applications. So this is important because from an SCCM perspective, those collections can be just as complicated, if not more so, than the smart group concepts inside UEM. So what this allows you to do is at the same time rationalize some of those collections in SCCM, because some of those settings no longer apply. Right? Some of the things that you do traditionally in SCCM, you may not want to do in modern management. So it gives you an opportunity to rationalize those and at the same time look into them. The mapping side of things, the mobile guys understand that, right? So from that perspective, as long as they give you that kind of smart group that you need to map this to, then you can pick up those collections and move them over into UEM. From a simplicity perspective, obviously there's type ahead, but this is an example of where I'm going with the rationalization, because what you're saying here is that maybe you have New York executives, that you have West Coast executives, whatever it is. Here in modern management, maybe you have a single smart group, because you just know that's the exec smart group and they need these applications. So the point here is the fact that you can start that rationalization and you can start to simplify how you deploy those applications from a modern management perspective. Now, the thing is you can take advantage of all those collections, all the things you know and love. You can get right down to individual device types, and you can build those collections out to meet those device types, and then map them over into that modern management world. And this gives you that flexibility of choice to start that migration of those workloads based on the fact of the low-lying fruit, right? The application estate, which is super simple, and the end user cases that you understand that are quite straightforward and give you the ability to embrace modern management on the fly. Same time as well, you can still take advantage of all those complex query rules that you build inside SCCM, so you know exactly the devices that you're reaching out to. From our perspective, again, it's 3 steps: plan, execute, and monitor. And the point here is that you haven't got to really understand too much about the SCCM estate if you're coming from the mobile side, and the SCCM guys don't need to worry too much about the mobile estate if you're coming from the SCCM side. You have a single console, 3 topics right there, and that's the ability to get those applications across. Now, from a dashboard perspective, and again, this is how this looks. You've got this co-managed estate. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but basically 3rd column over, whether it's in SCCM and only SCCM, or whether this is co-managed, and then to the right of that, you get to see the mapping inside UEM, inside where we map those to the devices. So again, giving you that instant view to be able to see the translation between SCCM and modern management and what's happening inside that estate. Now we take that one step further as well, and I think you're going to touch on this in the demo, right, Aaron?
Actually, how about you just...
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, the basic flow is map, enroll, and then manage. So we'll get in here. Now this is enrollment. This is something, it is optional. You don't have to use this. But basically customers are like, hey, give me a blueprint to get started. So that's what this is. This is a simple blueprint you can go through. Some of it's drop down. But basically, like if there are blogs out there. My own VMware IT department was like really begging that they would have this, but they figured all this out before we introduced the product. But anyway, this will build the command line for you. This will basically build your enrollment application. Now here, when you see content location and distribution selection, these are SCCM fields, obviously. So we're actually going to browse and go get this. This is your content location. Because once we finish this whole blueprint here and hit create, we're actually going to create an SCCM application. Now, on the prerequisites, it said that read-only access for SCCM is required, and that's true. However, for this single piece of creating the enrollment app, obviously we need to have write access to be able to create an application. So if you want to create that in a special little folder for us, you're welcome to do that. But this is the one piece that requires more than read-only permissions. And the distribution selection basically says, hey, if you set it to auto, we'll push it to all the distribution points. If you're not comfortable with that, then just say manual, then we'll create the app and you choose how to distribute it. All right, so we'll actually show you it is a legitimate SCCM application here. And you can see we haven't actually created a deployment. So the reason that you might want to use this is because as we roll into the next feature, you'll see we'll do a mapping, and then we'll actually be able to use this enroll button. That enroll button just uses that enrollment application you just created. You don't have to do that, right? You can just send it out through SCCM if you want. Airlift doesn't care. Airlift will see the device come up on the other side and map the relationship. But this is just a simple way to have Airlift send a vanilla deployment action to SCCM. So again, optional, but we just tried to help as much as we could without kind of infringing on SCCM territory. And so here you have the basic assignments. We'll go through some of the things that you can do against these VMs. I'm sorry, VMs. Just came from a Horizon meeting. Sorry. But you can use this to manage Horizon Persistent Dedicated. I guess I get that plug-in. So anyway, here's managing Windows updates. We'll do some of these profiles. And we'll just go through this briefly. Okay, and now we have a device up and going, and you'll actually see it begin to enroll. And then we show you it's a legitimate SCCM app. It's even in your software center. So the idea here, again, is optional, but we just try to put enough pieces in place to make it very simple. And the nice thing is you can choose to do this device collection by device collection, right? So you might just want to create a POC, right? And create a new device collection that has a bunch of criteria and narrows it down to, I don't know, the 100 devices that you want to start with. My experience in IT and working with customers is the key ingredient for a POC is to identify the right people and the right devices to do your POC against to show success. So that's why we give you that flexibility. In terms of the enrollment and what we're doing here, we're just kind of giving you kind of the end user viewpoint. One of our BitLocker features is the ability to do these recovery keys. That's something that comes built into the product. You can think of it as BitLocker management as a service, if you will. That is another one of the really common co-management workloads. I would say BitLocker updates and managing, or BitLocker management and Windows updates are probably the top 2 workloads. Okay, 2 of 3 demos done, Oliver. We're doing well.
We're getting in there now. And that actually, so the whole kind of BitLocker piece is, when you think today, typically you use products like MBAM to manage the BitLocker side of things. From a modern management perspective, the ability to encrypt the disk, to escrow the keys, to auto-rotate those admin keys, say every 7 days, is super important. And a couple of customers that I've been to have actually said that BitLocker is like number 2 on their help desk list now. Password resets is number 1, BitLocker is number 2. So the ability to have that life cycle is super important, and again, removes the requirement for third-party applications to manage it. You've got one place to go for that ecosystem. So again, straightforward to set up, straightforward to do the integration. It's all done on a single page, but the nice thing around this is it gives you that command line and it builds it out, so it's silent to the end user. And that's really important. And again, anybody seen the VMware on VMware story? Has anybody downloaded that white paper and had to read through it? No hands, wow. Yeah, it's definitely worth the read, right? Definitely worth the read. We've been through this, we did this with all of our staff globally, and the outcome of that is we produced a white paper on, where some of this doesn't work, where the gotchas are, right? Where the real world is, where the rubber hits the road, what you have to think about. And Brooks and those guys, they will happily talk to you about how they did this and how they made it happen. And the net of that is that you get our experience in doing this globally inside our own organization. And again, super important. Pre-17 supported. Okay, that's another big important piece because there are some people right now saying, do I want to deploy 2016 or can I use my 2012 infrastructure in order to be able to manage modern management applications? And the answer to that is yes, we can help you do that. So you go through this kind of challenge of basically getting all the devices in, they're all silently enrolled into Workspace ONE. You can then start to do that code management around the application estate and distribute out those applications to the end users. From their perspective, they don't see any of this, right? All they see is the fact that they start to have, quicker updates from application estate when they're no longer connected to the network. They get the ability to be able to, take advantage of the modern management self-service catalog, right? Because you can start to put some of those new applications directly into modern management. You don't need to use SCCM for those. And again, that helps embrace the flexibility of choice from an end user estate around what they want to run from an application perspective. Next up from that is the devices side of things, because you're going to want to see what devices are out there, what are patched, what are managed through co-management, what are managed through SCCM, and at the same time get visibility as to where you are in terms of the estate and the adoption. And again, very nice, very graphical, straightforward for people to understand, and at the same time as well, you can drill into this in the collections that you know and love. So making it super simple for the SCCM guys to be able to understand what they're distributing to and what that looks like. Top of that as well, the application side of things, you can see the list, you can understand what's happening, and it's a straightforward kind of tick box exercise in order to be able to distribute those out. But the big important piece here is the fact that we added in some validation. How many people in the room have distributed applications from SCCM without an uninstall script? No hands. We've got some really good SCCM admins today, Aaron. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but the point is in a modern management world, people want to be able to uninstall applications when, say, the end user unenrolls their machine or leaves the workforce and they want to redistribute it to somebody else. So again, this isn't going to block you do it. What this is going to do is it's going to flag the fact that there's some complex rules or some things that you need to think about. So again, making it easy for you to kind of inventorize what you're pushing into modern management, and at the same time understand whether or not you need to add in those uninstall type scripts. 7-zip isn't really a kind of overly secure application, but you can see the point behind this. You get to see exactly what's happening.
All right, you're going to make it. This is the third of 3 demos, so you're in the home stretch here. Like Oliver said, I think in some use cases, right, the application is critical, and especially for some of those devices that the answer is they have to get on VPN for this, that, or the other thing. Modern management is a great platform for them. So the validations are key. Maybe you all do uninstall scripts, good for you. But there are other validations that we look at, and the idea is that you have a green, yellow, red, right? So if you're looking at a project and you just want to hit the ground running, go fast, then sort by that. Put a checkbox on a bunch of green ones and hit export. And there you go. You've got your POC up and running. You've got some apps in there to play with, right? The yellow ones, we will export, but it's like some FYI, like, hey, we're going to change the context, or hey, it's missing an uninstall. Those are kind of informational. And then the red says, hey, we don't have what we need. So this takes you just through a basic tour of once you have the applications into the Workspace ONE platform, how do you go about assigning them? We have an auto model, we have a self-service model that we call on demand, and we have this ability also to manage the apps that were already on the device that the user had installed. So this just kind of walks you through an informational tour of how our software distribution works. You'll see here we've got a catalog of items, pretty straightforward. Now that we're going to go through and do an enrollment, and then we'll do the same thing, and we'll actually show you the applications coming down and being put on the device. So here you can see we actually are going to do an upgrade. The New York salespeople have been upgraded to being called knowledge workers. This is PowerPoint. We can do it in PowerPoint. All right. So is everyone aware that we deliver applications over a content delivery network, and then we have P2P capabilities in the branch offices as well? Up to you? Yep. Okay. Yeah. So that's a table stakes feature. We realize that with SCCM distribution points, there's a cost associated with that. So I've had a number of meetings just this week as well where some people weren't aware that we had that capability. So that is something that we can easily handle a branch office. You still have the one-time pull of the thing over the WAN or over the internet, but after that it's P2P distribution. Very straightforward. So basically just in the modern management world, you're a little bit more accountable for providing notification and just kind of awareness to the end user of what you're doing, how long it's going to take, and providing those notifications. So you can see that we do that. And then this is the co-management dashboard. I think we have a separate slide on this later, but I might save you a little time just by hitting this real quick, if that's all right.
Sure.
Or we'll just go and continue the demo and map another collection. Okay, that's right. I did want to show the remove thing. So you do have an exit ramp. If this is a POC and this is a temporary kind of thing, and then you're ready to move on to the next phase, we do have the capability to remove the mapping. Now we set the default that we will keep the device in the UEM tenant as well, because if you're doing BitLocker encryption, you don't want to yank that off and walk away. So the default is to leave it there. But you do have the ability to unenroll it as well. All right, that concludes our demo.
Thank you. So again, a couple of important notes. So basically, from our perspective, we looked at this, we rationalized it. Applications were the way forwards, right? So from this slide, the real takeaway item is it's not SCCM packages. What we're doing is unbundling the application, understanding the dependencies, and making sure that this happens from a modern management perspective. Now, I'm going to put Aaron on the hook here because that's not to say that if people need to be able to move packages, that that's something that R&D won't look at. But from day one today, we're saying applications are supported 100%. And this doesn't matter whether it's MSIs, XEs, zip files. We understand how those scripted install routines work, and we can translate them over to modern management very quickly. We've been able to distribute MSIs from modern management for years now, right, inside UEM. So we understand what needs to happen in order for that to be succinct, such as battery life, health, hard disk space, making sure it's connected to the network, all those good things before we push out those switches, and then out the back of it, we get to understand what the kernel exit codes were and whether we need to do reboot cycles. So we understand all of that from a modern management perspective, and we've done that for years. So this really ties the two worlds together quite nicely because we can take those scripts, understand them, interpret them, and push them into modern management. And that's really the approach. And as Aaron said, when you start to look at how you distribute applications from a modern management perspective, because you are geographically dispersed and could be sat on a Starbucks Wi-Fi network, right? You need to be able to get those applications out with not necessarily the branch node type relay points that you've traditionally had. Now we can add intelligence on the internal LAN to minimize bandwidth, but the net really of this is the fact that we use CDN in order to distribute those applications globally. And that's important because when you start to look at those relay node estates and those branch nodes that you have on the SCCM estate, you can start to realize that actually there's a huge amount of cost associated to that. Again, I spoke to one customer, they had over 12,000 nodes. Right? Just the hardware refresh cycle and budget for that alone was huge. It was a huge impact on their budget list in terms of being able to deprecate those over time. So again, the activity log's really nice because nobody likes to push something into a big black hole and walk away. There's no confidence in that. So being able to have an activity log that you can look at, that you can inspect and understand exactly what's happening with those enrollments, with those application distributions across all those different collections is really important. It gives you the confidence that you know what's happening. And again, with the dashboard side of things, again, super simple. You can log straight in, you can understand it, you can see what's happening, you know what your top workloads are, and that's really important, you know, if it's doing encryption or what's happening in the estate, and at the same time as well, you can see what those co-management collections are doing in terms of whether they're SCCM only or what the kind of estate is in terms of the co-management side of things. The devices and applications is really important as well, right? So the whole point here is that you know that you've got 13,457 devices that are managed in modern management, that are co-managed effectively, but you've still got 17,384 devices, I've got to get my eyes tested, 384 devices that exist inside SCCM. So again, we're breaking it apart and we're giving you both worlds in a single dashboard. And it doesn't stop there, right? Because when you start to look at what modern management can do with intelligence, this really is a game changer. And I'm not going to take too much away from the intelligence sessions, but when you start to be able to be predictive and proactive around security and patch management and things like that, all of a sudden this makes a lot of sense, right? You can start to build out workflows and intelligence around the estate that mean that you know that everything's up to date. So I recommend, if you haven't seen the intelligence side of things, that you go and sit through one of those sessions, because trust me, it will give you an awful lot of information around how we can secure the infrastructure. So ultimately, we've given you the tools to have a foot in both camps. You can embrace modern management today. You don't need to change anything you're doing inside SCCM. Maybe you want to build out 1 or 2 new collections, but that's really it. But going forwards, it doesn't make sense for you to distribute applications from 2 places and go through that whole life cycle of having 2 bits of work to do. Here you can exist inside SCCM still, map that over to modern management, and then slowly, as those machines move over to modern management, flip that switch and go all in on modern management. At the same time as well, it's pretty risk-free because, as Aaron demonstrated, you could just unenroll machines at any point, right? And you're not going to impact the estate in quite the same way as you would do if you lift and shifted the entire of SCCM into modern management. And again, you can turn around we turn around to customers and say, this gives you the opportunity to embrace both, to move forwards, to try this today and not have to wait 2, 3, 4 years out until it becomes, really compelling to have to shift over to modern management. So hopefully that makes some sense. Anybody in the room think this makes some sense? Okay, I've got more hands up. That's the most amount of hands up we've had today, so that's good. I really appreciate it if you could fill out the survey. Hopefully this has been interesting, and I thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.